Hey, and welcome, and let's talk masonry. No, you didn't click on the wrong video. This is Front-End Engineering Explained, and we are going to be talking about masonry, but not about bricks and building walls and things like this. Instead, we're going to talk about the layout technique that resembles masonry from the brick and mortar world. You might be familiar with that if you think about stuff like, for example, Unsplash. So if we scroll through here, you can see we have different aspect ratio images, different sized images, but we don't have a problem where, for example, with this image being way down here and there's all this space around here, um, everything kind of slots into place as a brick wall does oftentimes, because not all your bricks is exactly the same size. Unfortunately, on the web, this is still not something we can do with just the web platform. Depending on how you look at it. We can't just do it with CSS and HTML. You're going to need JavaScript today. But there are some conversations happening, and you might have heard or seen some of this floating around, depending on how closely you're following all things web development. There's just so much going on. But you might have seen that there is some discussions from the WebKit team. There was early on prototypes from the Firefox team, and then there's also some stuff from the Chrome team. And then, of course, the CSS working group is now discussing and trying to get to something of a standard. So I want to walk you through a couple of options we have today. Some that's not options, but I'll show you a workaround. Some that could be an option in very limited scenarios. I'll show you an example of using a JavaScript library. And then I'll show you the proposal that the Chrome team has shipped in Chrome. So you'll need Chrome beta and you need to flip some flags, but I'll show you all that stuff. But when we get to that part of this video, remember that the syntax that I'll be showing is TBD, up in the air, kind of just thinking out loud, prototyping stuff. With that, let's dive in. So one thing, we have this. Now, clearly, this is not what we want. Like, we can clearly see this is the opposite, not the opposite. Is it the opposite? Maybe it's the opposite of masonry. We have all this white space, right? And what I'm using here, if we go in, is just grid. We're just laying out with grid. And of course, with grid, we have our grid. So we have our columns and our rows. Now, let me be clear. If you have control over the images and you, for example, know, here is my 5 images and I want them to look like this. You can create something that looks like masonry by using like grid template areas and stuff like that and span and all these kinds of things. You can do that. But the idea with masonry is that you don't know what images you're going to get. For example, in all these samples, I'm doing the same kind of thing. I'm calling an endpoint that is calling Unsplash under the hood, and it's just returning a bunch of images. And I'm just getting these like, I think under the hood back in the, where the JavaScript running, in the serverless function. It's some category, I think nature or something like that, that I'm searching for images and it just gives me a bunch of images back and I can control whether I want 10 or 30 or 20 or something like that. And then I just basically create like a list of images and each is a picture with a fig caption and an image, and they're all linked. But I don't know whether the first and the second image is going to be portrait or landscape or what are they going to be? I don't know. And it's in these cases that something like masonry becomes really useful because it figures out and moves things around to make it look nice, cohesive, and you don't have all these gaps happening, right? So you can curate it with grid, but you can't just throw a bunch of images at it and have it figure out. Kind of the best thing you can do is to couple aspect ratio here with objects fit cover. And then if I do that and we go back here, now at least you don't have the wiggy waggle open space craziness going on, right? You have nice blocks, predictable, super nice. Okay, but this is not a solution for us. Now, if we move on to Flex, we can get something that is masonry, but within limitations. So we're going to stepwise change this. So if we go into the code here again, what's under the hood, like what you see visually, same deal. Calling an endpoint. In this case, we're getting 10 images, and we're just creating a list of picture elements with fig caption and images. Same thing every time. So the only thing that's changing is the CSS. So right now we just have a straight up display flex with gap 1. We're not wrapping or anything. So the first thing we have to do is we have to go into flex flow column. But now, of course, we have one column of images just stacking. But you can see we have images, some that's portrait, some that's more landscape. So now the next thing we can do is we can say wrap. This is not going to do anything yet. Now here is where the limitation comes in. For you to get this masonry-like layout with Flex, you have to set a max block size. So if you've not worked with logical properties before, that means a max height. So block being your vertical axis. Yes, your vertical axis. So if we do that, if we give this a max block size, so let me do, and then turn this one off. If we do that and we give it 120 dynamic viewport block, now you can kind of see we're starting to get something that resembles masonry. Like, it's definitely not as beautiful as we see on Unsplash, for example, but it's a little closer. You can kind of see like this guy and then this one, and then it goes over there. But of course you can see this one couldn't have fit in there because there's not enough space left. So I had to push it over into the next column and so on and so forth. And of course, now if we have 10 images, it fits in here. But if we bump this up to, for example, 20 images, then now we're getting it stacked tighter. And you can even see, like if you look over here, you can see our masonry happening. But of course, here's the limitation. We now have a horizontal scroll. Now, I mean, you could give it a max inline size. That by itself is not going to do anything for you here. But I mean, you know, you could do overflow clip. Whoops. But that's not ideal, right? Because you're losing data. But if you are, maybe if you have some kind of component where you know you're getting a certain number of images, it'll never be more than X, and therefore it'll fit within a specific space. Like again, you can hear I'm really stretching here to find a scenario for this, but there is a scenario where this can work, and this can be some kind of okay-ish version of masonry. So, and maybe if you really tweak it, you can even get closer to it, but I don't want to dive too deep into each of these individual topics. So we're getting closer. Now we can jump in and bring JavaScript in. Now, there's various options out there. And generally how it goes is it starts from a library that just gives you masonry, and then it kind of adds additional features, like maybe it has something where you can set some of the images to be a little larger than others, or maybe it has some dragging capability. So maybe you have like a output that displays images, and then a person can kind of drag the images around, or maybe it's not even images. Maybe it's just some other content containers, and people can kind of create their own little dashboard. You can kind of imagine that. So as you drag and drop, it kind of moves things around. But if all you want is masonry, and then there's others that even add more and more stuff on there. And of course, if all you want is just to have an image gallery that lays out with masonry, you don't necessarily want to bring in a library that has all these additional features that you don't need, because performance, right? So there's one called Masonry, the best name ever, because it literally tells you what it does. And that's all it does. Thing with this one is, as you can see from the like timestamps kind of here on the right-hand side, there was a release in start of July 2018, but you can see like 7, 8, 10, 9 here. So this isn't maintained anymore. It works, but it's not maintained anymore, which may or may not be a problem for you. I actually found this one linked from the post that the folks from WebKit had in their blog post when they were talking about their vision for masonry on the web. So clearly this is something that a lot of people out there use and rely on, and it's totally functional. But it's been around for a while. You could potentially, and I've toyed with this idea, you could rewrite this using like modern JavaScript and maybe get a little bit more performance out of it. It could also just be a fun project. But maybe in the not too distant future, we won't even need JavaScript, but it could still be a fun project. Anyway, that's the one thing. Keep an eye on this Desandro because there's another one called Packery. So Metafizzy, same person here. This one, if you look at the last release, is technically a little older in terms of releases. June is before July, I believe. But you will see here in the dist and JS, it changed 6 months ago. The comment says MIT license, so I'm guessing it just switched licenses. If I look everywhere else, then I think that's what happened. So Packery version 3 was made available under MIT license. I kind of think maybe maybe I had to pay for this at some point, or you could only use it in certain circumstances. But this is it, and it has draggable grid layouts, and it has some options and stuff like that that you can pass, but it's not overly verbose. And I think with all the options out there, this might be a nice kind of balance between masonry and all the other fancy things. It gives you just a bit more that might be useful, but it's up to you to decide what works best for you. But what is the end result of that? So if we go in here, again, pretty much everything is the same. We have a Packery container, we have our list, just some basic styles. Most of this is exactly the same as the other one. Like if we go here and you look at like the visitor, blah, 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 fig caption, all that kind of stuff, you can see it's exactly the same. Where it changes, of course, is down here. First of all, we're bringing in Packery, and then we do some, this is all the same, but this now gets added. So we're creating a new instance of Packery. We're giving it the container that contains all our stuff. We have an item selector, so that's our individual items. Let's just quickly highlight this guy, and then, so as you can see there and there, to each list item, we give that. So we're passing that in. We're saying we have a gutter of 16 pixels. And then this is just something I was messing around with. I can't even exactly remember what percent position does now. But the end result, so again, exactly same HTML under the hood, is this, which is really pretty, I think. It's really pretty. The thing is, if you open this, I'm going to open this in here. Now, if I press tab, have a look. So far, we're good. But now we're here, and now we're over here, and now we're over here, and now we're over here, I think, and now we're over here. So you can see the focus, the tab order doesn't quite match the visual order. And this is a accessibility challenge that also, by the way, when we get to the the proposal from the Chrome team, when we get to that, it still suffers from the same problem. This is an acknowledged problem. And if you think about it, because of the way that the layout engine, or in this case, the JavaScript layout engine, what it needs to do is it can't guarantee that the source order will always match the visual order, unless it does a lot of DOM manipulation where it literally like, oh, this node I actually need to put in the second place so the layout works. So then I need to move it up in the the node also in the DOM, so it's the second one in the list instead of being the fifth. So you can imagine it might take A, B, C, and then it might have to grab G and move it next because that's the most logical one. So this library doesn't fix that problem. I might be missing an option or something that can do something like recalculate tab order or something like that. But this is also something the web platform will need to solve, because ideally you would want your tab order to match your visual order. I don't know if we'll be able to solve the source order matching the visual order. Don't know. But at the very least, our tab order should be predictable and match the visual order. So if you're a keyboard using, you're tabbing through, it should be predictable where the next tab is going. So if you, for example, if we reload and you're like, oh, I want to see this image bigger, it should be the third tab, right? Maybe the fourth. Again, see, it's already a little tricky even to just reason in your head what should be number 3. Should this be number 3 or should this be number 3? Going off on a bit of a tangent here. But that is Packery, and that's what it gives you. Beautiful, works great. I haven't seen any performance issues with it. So if we, let me see here, where's my, so let me just check. I think I just paused per page. Yeah, let's bump that up. And let's also do 20 images here. So now we have a lot more images and, you know, it's doing a great job. So that's how we can do the JavaScript. So what can we kind of look forward to with the web platform feature? So this means HTML and CSS, no need for any JavaScript or third-party libraries. So again, remember the syntax is very much up in the air. We, for example, have this display masonry that I'm using here, which already I'm never sure whether it's been decided that this is not going to be a thing or whether it might still be a thing. So let's just go with what the potential is here, and that this is one of the potential syntaxes that we might use. Okay, caveats out the way, let's just enjoy what this can be. So for this, you will need at least Chrome Beta. Then you want to go to a Chrome Flags. You want to then search for CSS Masonry layout, and you want to enable that. And once you've done that, it's going to ask you to restart the browser. You do that, and now you're good to go. Now the browser will understand what that syntax means. So right now, well, it's masonry. Clearly, we can see the guys slotting into place, very nice. We have some kind of logical tab order right now, but again, we're still early, and it's not quite, but it's not bad. But of course, this doesn't look great at all. So right now, you will notice that it uses a syntax, especially when we use the shorthand, which we're going to be using here, that might feel familiar if you've worked with grid before. So let's check out this first one here. So we use the masonry keyword, that's our shorthand. And now we're saying AAB, 5 rem, 20 rem, 45 rem. What does that mean? Let's save and let it reload. So now you can see what that means is A is our first column, and we're saying create a column that is 5 rem, and then create another, and the next column should be 20 rem, and then the last column should be 45 rem. So that's essentially what we're getting now, is we're getting this kind of deal. May or may not be what you want, but that is an option, and it's a one-liner, and there we go. Our next option is to use very familiar grid syntax. So here we're saying repeat 2 at 5 rem, right? Then auto fit at 20 rem, and then what's left over, let's stick that into 45 rem. So you get another pretty interesting layout, and you can mess around with this, of course, right? You can change this to 10 rem, and you're going to get something like this. And you can say, well, actually, let's do a 10 and let's do a 15. And you get something more like this. Fast as heck. And yeah, pretty nice. The tab order isn't totally terrible, but it is a little all over the place. It started out really good, but then it kind of went off the rails a little bit. But again, as said, like I'm not expecting that to work. It is something that still needs to be figured out. But then this one just tells it auto fit, min max, 20 rem, 1 FR. So now we're going to get our classic masonry that we see all over the show and that we saw with Packery. Now you can see how it's like moving things and, oh, this guy would work better there and this one would work better there and da-da-da. And it's beautiful. I mean, this looks great. Here's the other cool thing you can do. So let's say you have that, but you have like, but you know what? I kind of want my second image to kind of be featured. So there's this familiar syntax here that you might have seen before, grid column span 3. Again, this might not be how it's shipped once this is shipped for reals, but for now we have that. So I have a little bit of JavaScript here at the bottom, and as I loop through my list, of course I get an index, and I'm going to say, right, if the index is 1, which means our second image, because remember arrays are 0 indexed, then add that featured class to that specific image, which means it's going to span 3 columns. And then we get this. That's pretty nice. You could also say, you know what? I actually want my first one, so number 0, I want 0 to be, whoops, full bleed. So now you have like a big hero, right? And then that is very big. And then you have the rest of your masonry happening there. And then of course you can get all kinds of creative. Like you can do a modulo, where you're like saying, okay, every odd image is featured or every even image is featured. Or you can do something like, for example, this. You can like say, okay, 0 and 4 includes index. So now you're saying if the index is either 0 or 4, then give it featured. So now you're getting this kind of deal, right? Snazzy, looking very, very cool. And you can play around with it. Now, to show you that this is prototype world, technically, if we look at this article over here, where, by the way, you can also provide feedback, and you should provide feedback, there's this option to say row. For me, right now, as soon as I throw row in there, then computer says no. then it blows up and things go all wrong. And it doesn't matter. It's not just like that syntax. Like, for example, if we go to here and we see like the AAB 50, 100, 200 row. So I have rems, but you know, other than that, ooh, not rem, row. So if we go back here, you can see it's gone kaboom. So yeah, this is not quite working. I think there's supposed to be a scroll in here somewhere. I don't know. But yeah, the row syntax doesn't work unless you double check it's row. Let's switch it to pixels and see if maybe somehow pixels is the thing that maybe doesn't play well with. No, no, no. As soon as I throw row in there, then it's just like, and it blows up. But this is exciting. I mean, you can see with really simple syntax and a little creativity with your JavaScript, or maybe, you know, this doesn't have to be done with JavaScript. I have a previous video where I showed some cool stuff you can do with nchild, and I also linked to a post from somebody who shows even all the other cool stuff you can do with that in combination with the hash selector and all that kind of stuff. So you can move this kind of 0 and 4 includes da-da-da. You can move that into CSS. It doesn't have to be in JavaScript. I just did it there because it's quick and easy. But it's exciting. So this is something that may come to the web, a browser near you, in the not too distant future, and we can have really funky layouts like this, or just a plain old masonry if that's all you need. But in the meantime, something like Packery is a really good option. I find it easy to use. I find it's performant. It's not super big or bloated. If you still find that too bloated, consider just masonry.js. I'll stick links to all the things in the description of the video. And yeah, maybe if you feel like I've been toying with this idea in my head of rewriting masonry.js, just the bare bones one in ESM, because I think maybe the other thing you could get is a smaller library size, maybe. Still be a fun exercise. And then in some scenarios, you might be able to get away with just flex using column wrap and a max block size. And then grid is there if you can curate. So if you're in total control, you know the images you're going to get, or you're creating like specific layouts and you're telling the person who's putting the page together, hey, if you have 5 images, you can lay them out like this, or you can lay them out like that. Like, I mean, maybe big, big, small, 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 or small, 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 big, big, something like that. But you kind of have to pick one, and it needs to match the number of images, and you get what I'm coming from. You can't just give me like a API call that returns a bunch of images and it'll just work. It could technically, if you're lucky, but of course you'll have to do stuff like enforce an aspect ratio. You have to set stuff like object fit cover, which means it might clip off some stuff that you might not want it to clip off. The aspect ratio might not quite work and things look funky, but you could make it work. And with that, you could kind of curate a kind of masonry with grid. But honestly, if you want grid today, if you want masonry today, and really what you're after is something that resembles this kind of deal, I would go with something like Packery, and then keep your eyes and ears peeled for what's happening in the web platform, provide feedback, try out new versions of the ideas that either the CSS working group or one of the browser vendor teams are proposing. And let's find something that we can all feel good about and that we will love to use. I hope you found this useful and interesting. I really did. Not listening to myself talk, but playing with all of this stuff. That was fun. And until the next one, make brick masonry things. Maybe also build some stuff around the house with bricks and masonry. I don't know. And yeah, have fun, and I'll speak to you soon. Peace.